Disclaimer, this video is not meant to promote or glamorize drug use in any way. Its primary aim is to educate you about the dangers associated with these substances. Please refrain from engaging in any activities mentioned in this video. I repeat, please refrain from engaging in any activities mentioned in this video. I was given this drug for complex migraines, and the morning after the first dose resulted in altered consciousness and anisocoria, where the left eye was dilated and less reactive to light than the other eye. I was promptly told to discontinue the drug by my doctor, and have ever since had more blurred vision, slight double vision at times, and a frequent manifestation of the conditions mentioned. I've had people mention the anisocoria many times, always the same effect. It continues to burden me with a majorly frequent haze of altered consciousness, or a dopey feeling. There doesn't seem to be any functional debilitation from the drug, aside from the mentioned persistent dopey feeling. However, it is very bothersome to the point that I am considering taking legal actions, but haven't yet due to the lack of extremes I feel would be necessary. There are some cognitive and memory effects which are apparent, but may be due to use of marijuana and tobacco, coupled with poor lifestyle behaviors, such as losing sleep and eating infrequently and low nutritional value. I used psychedelics a lot when I was younger, with my friends. I didn't have any goals in my life. I didn't have any plans. We were all under 18, and most were still in high school. When I was still in high school, I probably shouldn't have used psychedelics, including marijuana, so much. If I could take it all back now, I still wouldn't though. I feel I've done the fine-tuning enough today and finally sorted through the garbage. It started when my closest friends and I all started to smoke weed around the same time. We thought we knew it all, and looking back, we knew just a tiny little bit. I've done ketamine, LSD, mushrooms, MDMA, opiates, amphetamines, cocaine, DXM, LSA, benzos, alcohol, marijuana, many legal drugs, many prescribed recreational and psychiatric drugs, and many poor substitutes. Ketamine, LSD, mushrooms, MDMA, opiates, amphetamines, and cocaine. I have done less than a dozen times each. I haven't felt the need for any drug at any time, except when I was smoking marijuana daily. For about 2 years, I was smoking weed every day. I would take psychedelics with my friends whenever we thought of it, and more benzodiazepines with alcohol. The last 3 years, I have done DXM and LSA more times than I can count, and I believe at one point they may have helped to cloud my goals and my thinking. I was put on antipsychotics and antidepressants in July after getting paranoid while smoking weed with my 2 good friends. Late August, I moved away from my old friends and my old way of using drugs. My whole situation has changed, slowly, to the way it is now. I got in trouble with the law eventually for something I did when I was high. It was then I was introduced to Narcotics Anonymous, nearly a year ago. I quit using street drugs for various amounts of time, never getting quite 2 months off street drugs, honestly looking back at it. Still, I've used psychedelics only a handful of times in the last year, LSA and DXM. I believe I was more pressured into it than anything else, because my mother is a recovering schizophrenic alcoholic. She is also a born-again Christian. She found Alcoholics Anonymous is the only thing that helps her to not drink. She has never done any street drugs. I never even considered her an alcoholic. But one of the few good things about AANA is no one can decide that but yourself. At this time, I was getting switched from SSRIs, anti-anxiety, and antipsychotic medications by a psychiatrist. Nothing was helping me enough. I had not been going to college or ever really completed a full semester, and had really not made any friends my age since I moved. I had no motivation to do anything. Nothing seemed worthwhile, and nothing had been since I was about 16 or so. Now I had no drugs and no friends to do drugs with, so I declined more and more over the months. My old friends I talked to online were noticing changes in me and didn't know what to think. I did less street drugs, and never in consecutive days. I made a final choice about my using back in June, when I stayed 30 days in an inpatient recovery facility. It was there that I saw things in ways I never thought of before. I thought long about whether the prescription medications were holding me back. When I got out of my stay, I went to mental health again. I stayed there in the hospital for 3 days on a 5150 health code in California for an involuntary hold of a patient who seems a threat or harm to themselves or others, and was put on a new set of medications. When I got back to my mom's house, I quit taking any medications, and I sat in my bed all day, watching TV and sleeping. I didn't talk to anyone anymore. Around mid-August, I got around to setting my computer back up after just shrugging off that it was broken. I was not going to NA meetings at all anymore. I've gone to maybe a dozen meetings since July. I believe I felt generally stupider and slower, and my memory was shot. I got back online and spent the nights how I used to, on drug forums. It was near the end of August. I decided I was going to try DXM again. The last time I had done it was in May. About a week after I first did DXM, I met one of my only friends I've met in over a year. It was also from this that I decided to get back into mental health and tell the psychiatrist I had stopped taking the antidepressants and antipsychotics back in July. He gave me 5 new prescriptions. One of the new drugs the psychiatrist prescribed me was Topamax. The others are Wellbutrin, Trileptal, Seroquel, and Risperdal. The last 2 days before this night, I had just gotten my bottle of Topamax and bought weed. I took 4 Topamax and smoked a bowl, then 2 more a few hours later. The next day, I took a total of 5 throughout the day with a little more weed. I believe it had all been building up since I first did psychedelics again at the end of August. So last night, about 15 minutes after last smoking a bowl of low grade with tobacco, I make it to my front door. It is around 8 p.m. I smoked the last of my weed today at noon. Then I insufflated 2 Topamax 25 milligrams sometime from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. I was already feeling good at around 7 p.m. when I met up with my friend and smoked weed. I started to get real high real fast after the first few hits. I'm glad my friend understands how out of it I get on pills. Most people don't. I'm coming inside. I say hi to Brad. He's sitting on the couch, I think. It seems I'm going real fast. Everything is in a blur when I look back on it. I go straight to my room and close the door, a million thoughts in my head at once. I take my computer off standby, but I'm too out of it to get a chance to set up music. It was too hot, so I open up the blinds above my bed and turn the fan on. I then sit down and begin to fool around at the computer. I'm hearing mega music in my head. It reminds me of Queens of the Stone Age or Monster Magnet. It's awesome. It's about that song I've been writing. I open up Notepad and start listening to the 1-minute tracks I had recorded myself a week or 2 ago. Not as good as what I can play now on guitar. But I still like it. I realized it's all basically the same song, just different parts. I eventually stopped Winamp, sat on my bed, and hooked the guitar up. I started practicing for a little bit what I had been playing for the past 2 weeks since I first learned. Eventually, I sat back down on the computer. It had been roughly 25 minutes since I got home. I decided to go online, but I first thought of putting my weed away. I looked through my pockets and searched for my prescription bottle which had my weed in it. I'm doing all this while trying to load music on Winamp, trying to look for the right song for that moment. I still have Notepad open, and I start to write lyrics again. I seem to be getting more and more detached. I go to my closet to put my weed where I always put it, and when I reach into my pocket, I hear some voice, which sounded like it was through a megaphone outside my bedroom door, say something to the effect of, "Drop it, buddy." And then I heard right after, "If he doesn't make another move, that will be the only smart move he's made all night." Now I've heard paranoid shit before, on drugs and off them. I just thought I had flipped again. I hadn't even smoked too much weed that night. But this slowly started me into what built up to a massive panic. I ignored that voice and put the weed up in the top shelf in the closet when when I heard a different voice this time, still sounding through a megaphone. What are we going to do with this guy? And one of the first ones, he just doesn't learn, does he? Now I couldn't believe I had just heard 3 distinct voices, all seeming to react to my actions. I've never experienced this one before. So, starting to get a little more paranoid, I go towards my bed to close my blinds. I peer outside for a second or two, and I'm thinking real hard now. Is someone really watching me? I heard those same voices again chuckle while saying, "Oh, look, I think he gets the picture now." And another one say something like, "Oh gee, am I going to go to jail?" I then heard lots of laughter. I had a marijuana pipe, 1 bowl of marijuana, and prescription drugs in my room. On my computer, I had IRC and IM logs of my friends, and I planning road trips to meet. When I heard that last voice say, "the picture," my mind went off. I started thinking a million thoughts at once. Most were typical panic and paranoia thoughts. I thought it was over for me. I thought I was going to jail that night. I thought my mom's new boyfriend had been setting me up from day one. I soon convinced myself I had enough shit on my computer to convict me of conspiracy to distribute LSD, marijuana, mushrooms, probably more drugs. For all I knew right then, everyone online I had talked to were FBI agents or cops. I thought I was heading to federal pound-me-in-the-ass prison or the home for the criminally insane. My mind was racing. I started to visualize my new reality. I had visions of me in court, with my doctor testifying. Him saying how I had been delusional, how I hadn't not been delusional and schizophrenic since he first met me. I thought I was going to be locked up and fed psychiatric drugs for the rest of my life. And now, when I was high, it was all going to go down. I thought about killing myself for a few seconds there. It kept building. They were reading my thoughts. The voices kept going. They were telling me what not to do. They were advising me not to do anything more stupid than I have already done. Just get down on the floor, and it will all be over soon. The other ones would then agree. I stayed in those thoughts for the longest 3 to 5 minutes ever, just standing right next to my door, hearing the voices talk. I thought of going online, but I was frozen in terror. I had convinced myself my mom was in on it, that she had called the cops on me. I was completely incapacitated. I knew what I should have done. I should have put on music and tried to lay down to let it pass, or call someone up. But I couldn't put on music. I couldn't lay down and let it pass. The only thing I could do at the time was listen to what I was hearing. Time was non-existent. So in what had felt like an eternity, my thoughts eventually came to, why haven't I been busted yet? So I decided to see what was really going on. I opened up the door, and I can't remember hearing anything but distorted noise. I walk out into the living room. My mom and her boyfriend are just sitting there, looking straight ahead on the couch. I am severely confused and disoriented. I attempt to say something to them, but they can't seem to hear me. At this point, my thoughts of what was actually happening had changed. I thought for a quick second they knew I was on drugs, and they wanted me to tell them. I should have just kept walking through the house, but I then thought it might have been a setup. In less than another half second, I realized what was then the truth. They were listening to a AA speaker tape. In a matter of a few seconds, the tape was shut off, and I hugged them both. I told them I loved them, and I wanted more freedom in my life. They said they loved me and they understood. Just a week earlier, I basically told my mom's boyfriend to piss off, and I wanted nothing to do with him. I told my mom that night I had been depressed the last month or two, and I thought she didn't care. I said I just didn't want to tell them, because I thought they didn't want to know. I ended up saying that I was trying to find something that worked for me. When I got back into my room, roughly 5 minutes later, I felt changed. Things were different. At this point, my thoughts may have still been racing, but it's typical for Topamax and weed. I get a lot accomplished when I am like this. I played more guitar, and I felt a nice mellow high. I turned on Pink Floyd and laid down on my bed. I love music when I am high. I was just as high until I went to sleep about 6 hours later. What I have felt while high on Topamax in combination with marijuana, words will never do justice. Every time I have been on this, I seem to want to describe it, but I can't seem to make it sound right, and it never makes sense. I eventually just stopped trying. It takes a long time to get sentences out, and when they come out, it is usually jumbled and incoherent to others. At times, it has zoned me out, so I don't know what I am even thinking about. At other times, it feels like I'm even heading into being manic or a psychosis, on the verge of losing it. The great thing is, it varies so much with me. It's different every 15 minutes, and after every hit of marijuana, I smoke. I think I may still prefer benzodiazepines more. It has a similar memory impairment like Ambien does, and some of the sedating effects of muscle relaxers for me. I realized the night prior I had gotten to a point where I don't know what I had been saying or doing anymore. And this, for me, now is a great thing in my life. I just was myself, and that may not sound like much, but that is real hard for me. It has always been hard for me to be myself on drugs, or not on drugs. Topamax really works good for that. So my whole weekend on Topamax would consist of me doing what I feel I want to do, without thinking it through and not really having a memory of it, or not having a memory of it would not seem to matter. No regrets, just flowing and not caring. I've heard it described as making one generally stupid. The last few days I've done basically everything on impulse and with lower inhibitions. Drugs have really helped me work through what I have been going through lately. I would never have said that to my mom when I was high before. About the suicide thing, and my life being over. How I thought maybe that was the only way out. I think that was a major test for me. I've dealt with suicide in the past, but I don't believe it's the way out, or ever will be again. My arms will always be filled with burn marks and scars from abuse. I really didn't want to kill myself. I just didn't want that to be the truth. I have thought about a lot of important things to me in the last month. For now, I'm going to continue doing what I feel I need to do. I enjoy what I do with my time now, like I never have in the last year, or any time I can remember in my life. The Topamax was not kicking in, so I thought to myself, this sucks. I'm gonna go smoke. At least I know that'll get me high. Soon after I smoked, my mom came home from work. I didn't want her to see me high, so I told her I was going to sleep. I went and laid down on my bed. I'm anemic and I have a horrible circulation of blood through my body, and my thyroids don't work. So I'm always cold, so I bundled up under my covers, turned on some music to enjoy my high to. Everything felt normal until I realized my feet and legs were growing numb. The next song on my CD to come on was Head P. Jesus of Nazareth. That is when I started to trip. I realized that I was hearing the music, but only certain instruments, and the rest of what I heard was a hallucination. I kept hearing other instruments in the song that weren't there. I remember thinking, if my mom comes in here, she will definitely know something is wrong, because I am not all here. Next thing you know, my mom yells for me. She wanted me to do a chore for her. Somehow I snapped back into enough reality to barely manage to make it to her and complete my task. I went back to lay down and felt myself get numb again. For some reason, I kept visualizing lemons. Somehow lemons and my mother were connected. The song kept playing. I felt myself falling farther away from myself. The song is kind of a mocking of God. I felt like God wanted to punish me for everything bad I had begun doing since last summer. And for listening to that song. Sounds dumb, but yeah. Next thing I know, I thought I was waking up, but I wasn't. This was all a dreamlike state. I felt like my life before that moment had been a dream, a fantasy. I felt like I was waking up for the first time in my life, and waking up hurt. There was this adrenaline rush to my heart that was so strong it was painful. My whole body ached. God was punishing me. Then I thought I was dead. I have always believed that being dead was an eternal unconscious nothingness that would be painless. But this wasn't painless. I was so uncomfortable. The thought of being eternally dead in this state of pain made me cry and scream. I felt like this was reality. Reality setting in for the first time. That my actions did have a consequence, and this was the consequences I had to face, all summed up in one big painful load on me. I felt like everything that has happened to me in my past was me living in my la-la land I seem to get told I live in all the time. I felt like this is how everyone else in the world feels. How do they deal with it? Suddenly, everything I was seeing started to look like a film, like negatives of a film. I don't know how to explain it, but it kept rolling up. Everything was rolling up, like film negatives in a camera. I heard God condemn me, and He told me that all of my actions will have consequences, and I won't get away with things and have no bad karma for them. I felt an overwhelming sorrow smog out my lungs and through my body. It was the sorrow of the world. Everyone's sadness, I felt like I was experiencing it. My life started to roll back up in film. I suddenly shot up out of bed, gasping for air. I had actually woken up finally, but I was still paranoid. I ran to my mom crying and told her a few select details of my experience, as not to let her know I was on drugs. She thinks it was some sort of nightmare or heart murmur, LOL. But it couldn't have been a nightmare, because when I looked at the clock, about 5 to 10 minutes had only passed. I know this sounds dumb, but that's what happened, whatever it was.